Phoebe, thank you so much for coming on the Outdoors Fix podcast. It's lovely to have you, and we're in a particularly spectacular setting here. Can you describe for the listeners where we are right now?
Yeah, so we're in the woods at the back of the village that I live in, and they're kind of pretty ancient bit of woodland, I suppose. And it's probably one of my favourite places to be because I walk the dog here, I run through here, and I ride my mountain bikes through here, and the kids play in here. So I guess our backyard really.
It's beautiful. We're in a clearing amongst sweet chestnut trees, which look really, really old, and birch trees and oak trees, and we're on the edge of the Peak District. How would you describe, how far away are we?
Yeah, so we're not quite in the kind of Peak District National Park, but we're still sort of classified as the Peak District, but we're not far from Matlock and Matlock Bath, and not too far from Bakewell. And it's a good place for me because it's pretty central to all the places that I need to get to, and it's a lovely, lovely place to live.
Absolutely. And if you hear some sounds in the background, we've got your dog Bertie with us, and he's being very good over there, sitting under another tree.
Yeah, he's sulking because he's not fully involved. I think he'd quite like to be interviewed about what his joys about cycling and riding, coming on bike rides with us, and why he's been retired from that.
Well, you know, he can definitely come over in a bit and get involved if he wants to. And tell me about some of the cycling around here. You just said you love being in these woods. What is your kind of most common adventure when you're going from your home?
So from home, we're lucky that we've got some really good off-road tracks. So we've got great mountain biking in these woods over towards Black Rocks, which is more towards the Matlock area. And then, you know, there's loads of great riding even further afield towards Sheffield. But one of the best things about living here is the gravel riding. I think it's some of the best riding in the UK, and I think not a lot of people know about it, but we've got such a huge variety. So we've got, you know, smooth gravel, disused railway tracks, which are great for the kids. They're nice and flat, and there's loads of stuff to do along them. And then we've got more rough stuff that you can link them all up together, so you can do some really, really long rides without even sort of really touching the road.
And when you say gravel, for anyone who is not familiar with gravel biking, what are these paths? Just describe some of them. It's basically anything off-road, isn't it?
Yeah, it's anything off-road, and it's sort of like one down from mountain biking. So it's, you know, it can be a bit of single track through a woods, it can be like a disused railway line or a canal path, it can be something much more rocky and technical, and you can tailor it to what you enjoy and what you like, and you can mix all that together.
And I love that you take your kids with you, and you take your littlest one, and what's his name?
Torben. In
a trailer behind you on the gravel path.
Yeah, so he comes on a trailer, and he has done since he was about 6 weeks old. And because I've been a firm believer in, you know, having children, you have to adapt your life to have children, you know, there's no getting around that, but I also think that you shouldn't give up all the things that you love, and sharing, there's no greater pleasure than sharing the things that you really enjoy with your children, and they most of the time love coming with us. Sometimes they need a little bit of bribery and encouragement, but they're great, and I love us all riding together, so we had to get a trailer so that Torben could come along with us.
So you have Torben, and tell me about the rest of your family.
So I have Torben, who's the youngest, he's 2, and then I have Sabine, who is 8, and then my children, and then I have 2 stepchildren who are 12 and 9. So when we have the full crew, it is hectic. Amazing
adventures. I know, I've seen so many pictures of you up in the Lake District all adventuring together, and it looks like great fun. But Phoebe, you have an incredibly busy life. You are a paediatric consultant in the NHS,
Yep.
So that's working with children.
Yep.
You're a mum, you're a massive cyclist, you do cyclocross, you do gravel biking, you do endurance races, and then obviously with the trailer. It's a hell of a lot, which I want to talk to you about in a second. But when is the time that you most need to be on a bike?
So I think if I've had a rough few shifts at work, or everything at home's kind of got a bit on top of me, I know that for my own kind of sanity, I need to just get out on the bike. And I think there's something very meditative about just pedalling, just putting one foot in front of the other. I know, I think some people get that from walking, some people get that from running. I find, I don't mind running, but I find it a chore. Whereas on the bike, I feel like I can cover that distance and relax into it and just keep pedaling, and then it allows my brain to kind of process all those feelings and thoughts and stuff. They just kind of float through me, and then I always feel better afterwards. And I think over the years I've learned that cycling, you know, for many years cycling was like a competitive hardcore, I'm going to thrash myself, I'm going to push myself, I want to, you know, better myself each year on year. And as I've got older and life's got more hectic and I've mellowed a bit, cycling has become more of a pleasurable, not that it wasn't pleasurable before, but it was, you know, type 2 fun. Everything had to be hard, it had to be fast, it had to be pushing yourself. Whereas now it's like, oh, we're just going to go for a great ride and enjoy the scenery, and maybe we'll take a child or two with us, or maybe we won't, or maybe I'll ride with friends, or maybe we'll have a stop, or maybe we won't.
It's lovely that it's that place of solace for you and a way to unwind. I want to talk about all of your adventures very shortly, but I'd like to find out where this love of cycling has come from. So where did you grow up, and were you outdoorsy and also into cycling as a kid?
No, so as a child I was outdoorsy. We played out a lot, and I spent a lot of time on a local farm. So I was always outside, and I always had sort of maybe dreams of being kind of adventurous, but didn't really have the wherewithal or the kind of strength, I suppose. It was really small, really weedy and really unsporty. And I went to a school, very competitive school at primary school, which I think destroyed any kind of confidence I had in myself at doing like physical activity. And it put me off, I think. And then when you become a teenager, you know, there's nothing cool. There wasn't in those days anyway, in the like early noughties of going, you know, being good at sport or enjoying it. But I always threw myself into it. You know, I did Duke of Edinburgh. I spent a lot of time sailing and doing water sports and things because we've got a local reservoir to us, and found kind of my niche in those kind of activities rather than your traditional like ball sports at school. Like I was useless at netball because I was so short, and I was, you know, I liked a bit of hockey. So there was my dad was a cyclist, and it horrified us, you know, because he would turn up in his lycra to pick us up, or he would, like if it was cold, he'd borrow a pair of my mum's tights to wear. And, you know, as a teenager, this was just like, you know, borderline child abuse, to be honest. And it really, like, I guess put us off, both me and my sister. And then gradually, when I went off to university, I did military training, and that really improved my confidence in my belief that I could manage stuff. I could carry a big pack, I could run round, I could spend days outside, and that gave me that confidence, I think, to like push a bit further in terms of the sporty stuff. And I found cycling then, and because I kind of rekindled my relationship with my dad, going home to visit him, and he'd say come out for a ride with me to a cafe, and we would, and some of my friends would come home with us, and they'd all want to ride with my dad, and it became like a kind of fun thing for us to do, and then it spiraled from there. And
then you probably started to wear lycra too, didn't you?
Well, you know, lycra from Lidl. I remember my first cycling shoes were from Lidl. I had some great lycra from Lidl, and I thought I was like, you know, doing okay until I met like proper cyclists, I suppose, as they would classify themselves. Who were, yeah, it was a next level, but it grew from there.
So you got into cycling with your dad, but for lots of people, cycling means, going out for a leisurely ride or going on a road bike and doing some road cycling. But you got into cyclocross. Can you just tell me what that is? Because before researching you, and I had no idea what that was.
So I've always been someone who perhaps doesn't choose the easiest path. Like I chose one of the most difficult, you know, I think, in my opinion, like training schemes in medicine. And I've always picked the more challenging option. And I saw cyclocross as a way to like have a bit of a go at kind of a competitive element of cycling. Like we've been doing all this riding, but there was, you know, we were just racing each other, me and my friends. And we've got a really good league around here. And cyclocross is it's a popular sport in Europe, so it's really popular in Belgium and Holland. It's an off-road course, so usually like a grassy course with maybe a little bit through the woods. Sometimes there's sand involved, sometimes there's a lot of mud involved, sometimes there's a little bit of tarmac. And so the circuit is built, you know, with spectators in mind. So, you do as many laps as you can in sort of 45, 50 minutes. So it's kind of fast and furious. Sometimes you have to get off and carry a bike. Sometimes you have to, you know, run over little hurdles and stuff. So there's like an obstacle course, I suppose, on a bike, for want of a simpler description. And it didn't you went, the thing I hated about sport at school is it was, if you ran the 800 metres on sports day, which I regularly had to do because no one else would do it,
Yeah.
and I was always last, and like obvious last by miles, and obviously last, and people would be like pity clapping you to the line, and I think that it like burned into my soul that like I never wanted to be last. And the great thing about cyclocross is because you're all going round, and it doesn't matter how many laps, everyone's might be on a different lap. You might be last, but no one will know until they look at the results, and no one's looking at the results. So there wasn't that really demoralising feeling of like, oh, I've been left behind. I tried road racing, and if you're fit and you're in the bunch and you're in the middle of it, it's fine. But as soon as you get dropped from the bunch, it's so demoralising, and you have to keep going back, keep taking a kicking to get better at it. And maybe I didn't have the resilience, or maybe I think I just didn't enjoy that element of it. Whereas cyclocross, like even if you'd had a bad race, you'd like got covered in mud and you'd like slid around a corner and you'd like hung out with your friends, and it was fine. There were positives you could take from it.
You actually did pretty well in cyclocross, so I don't want to underestimate how well you did. Can you tell me?
I've raced at national level, which I think is all right for someone who was trying to juggle it with a full-time job and everything else. I think, I'm not a natural athlete. I'm a person with like a lot of grit and determination, and probably a lot of like mental strength rather than physical strength. I'm never going to be a brilliant racer. I just do it because I enjoy it, and I enjoyed seeing my own self-improvement.
National level, I would say that you're an athlete. That's an amazing achievement. So you did that, and when you were doing those races, how did you feel afterwards?
Well, I'm a very self-critical person, so afterwards I'd be like relieved that we'd finished, and then I'd be beating myself up for getting things wrong or not maybe performing at the level I'd expected. And over the years I've tried to get better at taking being proud of myself. I still haven't really got the hang of that. There's always room for improvement, but like now I just think, just to get to the start line when I've worked and juggled the kids, and the kids will have raced in the morning, and then we'll have swapped the children. Sometimes it's got an hour race on the same day, so we've like chucked the baby. I'd be breastfeeding a baby like in my skin suit with someone's pinning my number on, and I just think, all right, okay, I'm not going to win, and I'm not going to race at the level that I raced at a few years ago, but for me, that I've already won because I've got to the start line and I've given myself the opportunity to do it despite everything else. And it would have been so much easier to just say, I'm not going to do it. But for me, the visibility of being there and doing it is really important, because women of my age don't do this stuff. We are not, it's getting better. We have loads of girls racing, well not loads, we have more girls racing now than ever, but at 18 to 25, and we have lots of women racing at like vet 40, vet 50 level, because their children have grown up and are a bit more self-sufficient, or they might have a bit more time. But that bit when you're in the trenches with small children and juggling work and the mental load of the house, it's just, we lose women to sport at many points during their lifetime, so often at puberty, and then at when you have your children. And I think I just desperately wanted to prove that if I can do it, anyone can do it.
I think it's really, really inspirational, actually. And you're right, you don't see those women of those ages doing that. And what a great example you're setting, particularly to your daughter.
Yeah, well, I look at them and I think I'm probably almost to a slightly pathological level, desperate for them not to hate sport and exercise to the level that I did, and not to feel that like utter demoralisation that if you weren't really good at something there was no point doing it. Like, how many of us now do park run, or will run a 10k, not because we run a super impressive time, just because we enjoy getting out and getting the fresh air, or running or from a sociable aspect of it. This belief as a 13-year-old girl that unless you played county level netball, there was no point you even putting a pair of trainers on. I just think it's so miserable. We should be championing that moving your body and exercise is good for you. It doesn't matter about any other aspect of it. The competitive element is great if you want to do that, and that's why the adventures that we do as a family are important to me, because there's no competition to that. That is us getting from one place to another and getting back. That's teaching resilience, independence. They have to pack their own stuff, they have to work out what they need, they have to carry stuff, they have to push through when they're tired. And it's, you know, and then they feel that sense of achievement and enjoyment, and they're outside, rather than like, well, you came 10th and you could have come 5th, or, you know, this is a training session, or there's like a stick to be beaten with.
Yeah, it's so important, like you say, of making people realise, particularly girls, that it's not just netball and hockey. Yeah. You know, there's so much more, like cyclocross. Yeah. So going back to, I want to come on to your family adventures in a bit, but going back to the cyclocross that you were doing, you then kind of decided to try gravel biking. So where did that come about?
Well, they're basically the same things, really. The bikes are very similar. During lockdown, I got sent a gravel bike to test from Specialised, and we had nothing else to do other than like explore new routes. And that first lockdown, I was super stressed about work because we were expecting, you know, hundreds of really sick kids, and we didn't know what it was going to be like. The novelty of the kind of lockdown, I actually didn't mind because it took the pressure off everything else. Like I just had to go to work and that was it, and ride my bike, and I loved that. The novelty of lockdown soon wore off after that, but we just explored, and then I kind of previously got it in my head that I wasn't very good at endurance stuff, and that I could only do like, you know, and it was because I was trying to ride, you know, 100 miles at the pace of, you know, at 20 plus miles an hour with a bunch of blokes. And when it became off-road and you had to just do, you could do 100 miles but at your pace and enjoy looking at stuff, and it just became a game of eating and pedalling and chatting and surviving. And you know, a 12-hour ride like on the road, I couldn't think of anything worse. Like, I mean, you'd struggle to get me anywhere near a bike for that long.
Right.
But 12 hours off-road on an adventure to get somewhere or to race across something, I was like, oh well, 12 hours is just a shift at work, so I can definitely keep moving and eating for 12 hours because that's all I do every day at work. It's just, I don't have to make any decisions apart from like, do we go this way, that way, or when do I eat? I don't have to worry about anybody else. I just keep pedaling, and I realised actually I wasn't too bad at that.
How did you find out those routes, the gravel routes? Because when you first start out, that's quite an intimidating thing for people, isn't it? It's like, I don't know what bike to have, I don't know where to go, how long I'll be able to go for, what if I get stuck out there? How did you approach it?
Well, I think from a gravel bike point of view, there's no rules, so you can just ride what you want. You can ride what you've got and you can modify it slightly. You can put slightly bigger tyres on your road bike, or you can get a gravel bike, or you can ride your mountain bike. You don't need anything specific until you delve into the world of wanting to buy more and more things.
The rabbit holes, yeah.
And then you, in terms of route planning, I've always used Komoot. I love it, and I've got quite a good relationship with them. And I like the fact that you can, on the app, you can see pictures where people will share their routes and their pictures and stuff, so you can see what it's like, which when I'm taking the trailer is really useful, because sometimes, you know, if there's a style or whatever, you have to unhook the trailer and then you have to try, if you're on your own, like lifting, you know, sometimes I'd have to take him out as a baby, plonk him on the grass, lift the trailer over, and then put everybody back together. So, you know, having a bit of visual clues as to what the route looks like is great, and then now they've all got pre-plotted routes, so you can just put in, I want a 2-hour gravel ride in this place, and it will just give you the route.
Perfect.
Which is fine, and I've always been pretty self-sufficient on the bike anyway, so I can I can manage most things, punctures and minor mechanical problems. And riding around here, my parents aren't that far. There's enough people around here that if something horrible happened to me on my bike, that someone would come and rescue me. I've got enough cycling friends or relatives or people around that I could sit by the road for a bit and someone would come and scoop me up.
Well, it seems when you found gravel biking then, it kind of unlocked a new level of adventure for you. I've seen that you've had adventures in Scotland, all over the country. Can you tell me about some of those big adventures you've had on your gravel bike?
So I started off, so I've always enjoyed kind of like that side of the kind of cycling and the adventure, and I wanted to do more of it. So I previously cycled across Vietnam and Cambodia. Wow. As like on-road touring, or sort of dirt roads, before it was called bike packing and before it was probably considered cool. And then as we'd done more off-road stuff, we wanted a challenge, and Scott, my partner, said, oh, why don't you do the West Highland Way, because it's all like marked, so you can't get lost, and he knew the route really well. So
that's from Glasgow to Fort William?
Yeah.
Yes, and it's about how many miles is it?
Oh, I can't remember now.
Between 80 and 100?
Yeah, it's about 100 miles. I think it's about 100 miles. So we did it over 2 days, and that was fine for us. And we had a nice stop in Glencoe, me and Nat, and that was just our first experience of like being off-road, being in the middle of nowhere, kind of looking after ourselves. And oh my God, we packed so much stuff for like every eventuality you could ever imagine, because, you know, you've got Nat loves to plan, and I'm a doctor, so we got 2 people constantly worried about all these things that were going to happen to us. And then we got to Fort William. We were absolutely exhausted, and I was like, "Oh, it's okay," because I booked us some. We weren't bivvying. We were staying in little camping pods. I said, "Oh, I booked us a camping pod at Speen Bridge," and when I looked at the map, like, it was about 15 miles away. I was like, "Oh yeah, we just got another 15 miles to go." And we met people along the way, and it was raining, and we were carrying the bikes up the Devil's Staircase, and we got American tourists everywhere going, "Oh my God, that looks impossible. Like, why would anyone do that?" And we were like, people just thought we were insane, and we thought it was wonderful. And it built from there. So yeah, we've done loads of bikepacking all around Scotland. We've raced, then we sort of decided to add a competitive element to it. So we raced Scott Duro, which is from Inverness to Glasgow, so that's kind of 200 miles-ish.
Wow.
And the middle 100 miles, there's nowhere to buy food. I just loved that. I loved just I spent all my life looking after other people, and I loved that I just had to look after myself, and that probably sounds really selfish, but just 2 days of making sure I was okay, it was great.
You need those adventures for yourself, definitely, like you say, when you look after so many others. So you did that, and then tell me about you also did a crazy challenge, which was very admirable, to raise money for a friend in 24 hours around the Peak District, didn't you?
Yeah, so we wanted to raise some money for a friend who'd had a spinal injury and needed a new wheelchair. And so we built a route around the Peak District, which is 200 miles, all the gravel basically linked together. It's about 6,500 metres of climbing. It's absolutely brutal. And because we had to make it hard enough that people would sponsor us, because it was just a nice, anything less than that would have just been a nice day out cycling for us. So it had to involve suffering. And we had a great support crew. So we had, people came out and rode with us, we had, the guys in the van feeding us every few hours. It was a really great experience because it was hard, but we shared it with so many great people, and we raised a decent amount. I can't remember exactly how much money now, but we raised a good amount of money, and it was in between lockdowns, I think, sort of COVID time. So, part of me thinks I'd quite like to go back and do the route again, but maybe over 2 or 3 days, because it's such a great route. But yeah, I haven't built up the bravery to go back and face it again. I mean, I ride lots of bits of it normally, and sometimes I think, oh my gosh, I remember being here in the middle of the night and trying not to fall asleep on my bike. But
gosh, 24 hours you did that in. That's absolutely impressive. Goodness me. So all of these big adventures you've had in the last few years, now you still go out adventuring with your children, as we've talked about. But I just want to talk about your working week so people understand your job and also what you're juggling.
Yeah.
So you work in a hospital in Sheffield, you're a consultant. What are your shift patterns like? Where's the space for adventure, let alone a family?
Well, there hasn't been a lot of space recently. I've fairly recently become a consultant, and I've tried to just, you spin plates all the time, or whatever analogy you want to use, and some plates are bigger than others, and some take more strength to hold up than others, and that changes. That's a fluid thing. So sometimes my children need more of my attention, and they're the thing that I've got to deal with. Or sometimes work is overwhelming, and that's I'm having to get both hands to hold that plate up, and then so sometimes little things drop by the wayside. And I always say, you can drop a plate, because most of them are plastic, and it's not the end of the world if they bounce. But there are a few things that you can't drop. So, work is and even it's taken a long time really to be able to say I'm a mother first and then a doctor. I am a mother first and then a doctor, but I feel so passionate about my job that it feel like it is a whole of me, and it's probably the place where I feel the most sense of self and the most sense of self-worth, I guess, and a lot of that my self-esteem comes from that. So this year I've had to focus a little bit more on work than I have done in previous years, but a working week I mean, it's chaos. So for example, try not to work Mondays so that I get Mondays to get the house in order, get the shopping in. I do the school run on a Monday, so I'm always around for Sabine. Sometimes after school, depending on how things are at home, we'll go climbing for an hour or two. Sabine has a number of extracurricular activities that I have to drag around to. So she plays a lot of football, so she's training on a Tuesday. So Tuesday I try and do a day shift, which would be 8 till 4, so I get up at 5, get everybody sorted, get out the door, get to work at 8, work flat out till 4ish, come home, pick everybody up, feed everyone, get them into bed. On a good day, if I don't have to do the school run, I'll park and run a couple of miles into work, and then I'll run a couple of miles back to my car because we don't have any car parking at work. It's a bit rubbish. And that's my little bit of exercise for the day. And then often on a Wednesday I'll do an evening shift, so that's 4:10. So I might get time in the morning if Torben's in nursery to run with the dog, or I'll take Torben out on the trailer for a couple of hours just to get a bit of fresh air. Or I'll be doing meetings for work and a bucket load of admin and replying to emails. It just depends on what's going on that week. So I'll work till 10, come home at 11, go to bed, get up the next day, sort stuff out, and then sometimes I'll do another day shift, so I'll be up again at 5 and I'll be in the day, or sometimes I'll do a late shift, which involves starting at 7 and then working till midnight, so that's not too bad. But then I am on call till the next morning, and often I'll end up at work till 2, 3 in the morning if there's been a particularly sick child, or it's very, very busy, and it's becoming increasingly like that. And then I sometimes work weekends and sometimes I don't. So if I don't work the weekend, then we'll try and make some time to either ride on my own without having to drag a trailer, or I'll have to take children to football, or I'll have to find activities to entertain all 4 kids. So yeah, I work about 30-ish hours a week and then a bit of admin on top, so I'm technically part-time. I'm lucky that I have a really supportive partner, although he works away a lot at the moment, so it's hard. And I think you have to sometimes just park the fact that the washing hasn't been done, or it hasn't been sorted, or you haven't hoovered, or the washing up's not been done, but instead you've gone out for an hour's run with the dog, or you've gone and ridden your bike for a couple of hours because that's what makes you feel better. And no one cares who's done the washing up. The children don't care. I care, but no one else cares. So providing everyone's got clean pants, clean uniform, then we'll survive.
Yeah. Your job is incredibly intense. Working, I think we were talking about this a bit on the walk here, but you see things that most people don't ever see. And it must be something that is very hard to deal with at points. So how does your job impact your view of life? Does it impact your way you see, the outdoors or an adventure?
Yeah, I think it changes how you have a different perspective on things. So I still get super stressed and upset about the small things in life. I think it's natural. I think I get more stressed about silly little things at home than I do perhaps bigger stressful things at work. I think that's just how we are. That's probably just how I'm made. But it's easier to say to yourself, come on now, this doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that, for example, this morning my daughter spilt a green smoothie all over part of the sofa, and I'm sure it's never going to come out, despite lots of scrubbing. And I just think, okay, well, it was an accident. These things happen. It's just stuff. When you see people live out their worst, their worst nightmare, a really sick child, heaven forbid, a dead child at work, everything else pales into insignificance. And it doesn't mean that those problems aren't stressful. It just means that you think to yourself, well, right, we've got a nice sunny afternoon. Am I going to spend the day folding washing and putting it away? Or am I just going to shut the door on the spare room and leave the mountain of clean washing and go and enjoy myself because, yesterday I dealt with a child abuse case, or a really sick child, or I just had a very stressful day pulling bits of so we can want to Play-Doh out people's noses, and it's like, it's not like, a lot of my job is very rewarding and satisfying, but you know, in current society, you see huge amounts of misery, deprivation, poverty, mental health problems in young people because their lives are so miserable. And I feel like we should just make the most of the opportunity. You know, I'm very lucky, I'm very privileged. I live in a beautiful place. I've got the time. Sometimes we have the money, not always, to do these things. So you have to make the most of it.
So it puts things in perspective for you.
Yeah. And I think as well, you know, I care for a lot of children with disabilities. And I think, you know, you should really celebrate the fact that you've got a healthy, functioning body. Get it moving. Whatever that is that you like doing. I'm not saying everyone needs to go out and thrash themselves up and down hills, but, you know, make the most of that, because, you know, I've got children who, you know, can't do that or don't get the opportunities to do that. You know, whether that's because of disability or whether that's because of poverty and deprivation. So if you can give your kids those opportunities, really make the most of that. And I also see children nowadays who are incredibly anxious, who you know, spend a lot of time on screens, who spend a lot of time indoors, who have a fear of being outside, who lack all independence because we've like mollycoddled them and cushioned them from the world, because we love them and we do that as parents. But we have to give them that independence and freedom, and otherwise we will have a generation of completely acopic adults.
And what I thought you said in the past, which is really interesting, is to encourage kids to get out and do a hobby, to make sure that they realise that their self-worth is more than just work.
Yeah, so the most protective thing, so if you're raising children and you are looking towards their teenage years, right? So I would not be a teenager for all the money in the world again. So you've got the pressures of social media, you've got bullying, you've got the risk of exploitation, be that criminal, sexual, you've got a world where, you know, everything feels terrifying, right? And you've got pressures of exams and like the academic system. And the one most protective factor you can give your child to get them through their teenage years without, you know, a completely destroyed mental health or an eating disorder or all those other things is a hobby, a space outside of the school system with different friends, diversity, meeting people from different backgrounds, getting their self-worth from a skill, whatever that is. It doesn't have to be sport, you know, if they're creative, find something, if they're musical, whatever it is, but get them those experiences. And the problem is that costs money, and if you have no money, that's really difficult. And I totally understand that, but that's the thing that you can do to protect your child.
And that's why you're so, you know, wanting to spread this message of just trying to get out and do sport with your children.
Yeah, because, you know, I know it's expensive, I know there's a cost of things, but even if it's just a family walk, and the other element to it is walk with your children, run with your children. If you're out with them and they're walking next to you and they're not looking at you, they will share stuff with you that you wouldn't have known before. Children crave one-on-one time with their parents, and that's really, you know, when we've got 4 children, that's really difficult to give. And you're spreading yourself thin anyway, and you want your own time to yourself. So spending time with your children on a one-to-one level, but just doing something as simple as going for a walk, walking the dog, or you run and they ride their bike next to you, or they run and you ride your bike next to them, you will get more information out of them. They will open up to you, they will share stuff with you, you will get to know how they feel, you will get to know them as a person, and they will feel listened to and valued and loved, and that is what builds strong, robust, like emotionally intelligent children and young people.
It's such good advice. So talking about these family adventures then, I really want to hear about some of them, because these pictures you post on social media sometimes of you and your son and his trailer. So can you tell me, what is the trailer that you use for your adventures?
Well, I use a 2-lay trailer, so a bike trailer, basically a chariot, and it turns into a pram. And it hooks up onto the back of the bike, and yeah, you can shove him in from quite little. We probably put him in when he was quite a robust baby, and they're in like a little infant sling, so they're suspended when they're super little, so he was fine in it. And I drag that around, and then the other kids ride, and I've got a tow rope, so sometimes if they're tired, we'll put them on the tow rope and tow them, or sometimes I'll just give them a shove. And yeah, I mean, social media tells one story of like wholesome family adventures. It probably doesn't show the times that they've all been borderline hypothermia because we got stuck in a storm and we had to shelter in a bus stop, and my partner had to go and get the car, and they were all huddled under some like a hand dryer in some public toilets at one point. It doesn't show them falling off. It doesn't show me tipping the trailer over because I've gone way too fast downhill and round a corner. It doesn't show the endless amounts of sweets and ice creams and stuff that we offer them to keep them pedalling. But it does show that they, you know, most of the time they really enjoy it. They love a bikepacking adventure, and we just go from one place to another, stay in a youth hostel, and we usually go back the next day. I think, you know, we tread the tightrope of, you know, pushing them hard and putting them off quite closely, and sometimes we fall off and sometimes we get it right. But watching them look after each other and encourage each other has been something that's really special to me. And that's also come with them doing a little bit of bike racing. So they do some of the kids' races at the cyclocross races, and all of a sudden the middle two, so Sabine and Zachary, who are 8 and 9, are looking, you know, getting each other to, pinning each other's numbers on, and often they bicker and wind each other up, but they're suddenly this little united front, and Isabel, the older one, will be cheering them on, and it's been, you know, when you've got a blended family and you're building sort of semi-sibling relationships, finding things like that kind of get them all together has been really nice. So I love doing that, and we usually involve another family or two when we do our bikepacking adventures, so that there's a bit of peer pressure, because who doesn't love like riding with your friends and chatting with your friends? Takes the attention off, you know, your mind off, like, oh, my legs are tired, or I'm hungry, or it's raining, or it's boring, or whatever that they're thinking. They're too busy like racing each other up and down or looking at stuff.
Oh, it's lovely. And what's one of the routes that you've done that you would recommend to others?
So we recently did part of the Yorkshire coast route, and that was brilliant. So we went from Scarborough to Whitby. Great, like Scarborough, great fun beach, all your sort of usual seaside attractions and slot machines and candy floss. So that was like a nice start to it. Plenty of fun stuff to see. And then along a beautiful track along the Yorkshire coast, which is trailer friendly, a little bit hilly in places, but nothing too bad, nothing that our lot couldn't manage. And they're not, you know, they're active kids, but they're not super athletic. And then stayed at the youth hostel in Whitby Abbey, which is pretty special. Fish and chips, play on the beach, more, you know, being bribed to buy more tap from seaside shops, crystal dragons and stuff, ghost stories and things. And then we rode back the next day, unfortunately in the pouring rain on the way home, but yeah, it's a different part of the world, getting to see the seaside, getting there under their own steam. They love that, you know. What
do they say when they finish adventures like that?
Well, when we finished that one, everyone was kind of borderline hypothermic and cold. But they love it. When you ask them, did you enjoy it? They're really full of enthusiasm, and they all remember this, and we all slept in the bunk beds, and so-and-so happened to that, and we saw this, and and I think they feel quite proud of themselves. Sabine always likes to go into school and like do a little presentation about what they've been doing and tell them how far she's cycled and stuff.
It must be quite unusual amongst the kids in her school to go and do that.
Yeah, I think so. And then lots of the parents will come and ask me about it. And you can do it around here really easily because we've got all the disused railway lines, so anyone can do it here. You don't need to cycle far. Just park up and ride 6 miles to the youth hostel and have tea in the youth hostel, stay over and ride back to the car. Like, children don't need some epic. It doesn't need, you're not climbing to Everest Base Camp. It doesn't need to be this big showy adventure. It just means like, oh, well, we got from one place to another on our bikes, and then we stayed over and we went back. We travelled by bike, we got there ourselves, we put the effort in, we planned what we needed to take, and they really enjoy it.
Well, it's great that the families at your kids' school are sort of seeing what you're doing, and you're possibly inspiring them and just showing people what you can do.
Yeah, I think people think, oh, a bike ride, we'll go, like, especially around here, there's sort of set loops and things that people do. It's like, just mix it up a little bit, and I know that takes confidence to do that. And ideally, what I'd love to do when I've got a bit more time is help take families. So like we'll book out a youth hostel and we'll all go, so that if you don't feel super confident, we can support you with that and like you know, maybe my dad will drive the van as a backup vehicle if in case anyone has a total meltdown and doesn't want to do it. You know, so that there's that, because I think people need that maybe sort of safety net of like, well, what? Because it is hard, you know, we've got to times where, you know, one of the children is hating it and everybody else is enjoying it, and you're like, you just got to keep going because you've got to get there, stop moaning. the slower you go, the longer it's going to take. So, but you know, that's where the tow rope comes in handy and stuff like that. We just hook them up and drag them there. It's fine.
So what do you think in the future then? What do you think what's the place that, he's being very good by the way, Bertie's being excellent.
Checking.
Yeah.
It was a bit of moaning.
What place do you want cycling to have in you and your kids' futures, do you think?
I mean, I'm probably being overly ambitious, but I would love to do like a big adventure with them. I'd love to take them riding abroad, you know, bike packing abroad. I think at the moment, like, it's just a little bit tricky. With Torben being 2, he will go in the trailer, but he's starting to get fed up of being in the trailer. We have a Mack ride seat on the front of the mountain bike, and he much prefers being up out and seeing everybody. I think, yeah, with a bit more planning and preparation, something abroad would be great. I mean, ideally, like Sabine and I have talked about, maybe when she's much older, we'll go and ride together across Africa, or do something really cool like that. But I just want it to be this thing that we can enjoy together, you know, and share together. I don't want them to be, I mean, unless they want to be, like, I've got no idea of them being Olympic athletes or, you know, competing for GB or any of that. I want them to know that, especially the girls, that, you know, why shouldn't they be able to do everything? You know, why shouldn't they? Why can't they go and get muddy and ride bikes and climb hills and go, you know, do all these things? Why would they be any less capable of doing that than a boy? It always annoyed me as a child. So, and I think in many ways the world has become more misogynistic rather than less so. So I'm trying to kind of be that role model, that I'm just here doing my best, having a good time, enjoying it, without the pressure of a competitive element to it.
And finally, what impact do you think that cycling's had on your life? Has it helped you through very difficult times?
Yeah, I mean, it's probably kept me going. I mean, it's had a huge impact on my life, because I went from being, I found some of my sort of sporty stuff in the water sports kind of world as a teenager, and then it developed from there. But I went from being 100% convinced that I couldn't do anything like physical. Do you know what I mean? Like certainly like epically physical. Do you know what I mean? Like, I couldn't run 100 miles. I couldn't like walk up a mountain. Like, I was never good at like hiking. And now cycling has not just given me that like fitness and self-belief. I look at what we do with the kids, and you know, I walk 10 miles with the kids, right, with a good like maybe 25 kilos on my back, or a child on you know, a rucksack and a child on my shoulders, or I'll be carrying something else, and it doesn't, I just think to myself, I would have never had the confidence to drag my children out into the Lake District in the middle of nowhere on foot with a rucksack, you know, with 5 litres of water and 20 bottles of bloody sun cream, like, and plasters and biscuits and everything else, if I hadn't have found cycling, because it just opened up that world of the outdoors. But it also made me look at myself completely differently and realise that there's so much I could do, having been told for 20 years longer that, oh, well, you can do this but you can't do that, or you're not very good at this, or oh, that's not for you. Well, why the hell isn't it for me? Why? Just because I'm not good at it doesn't mean I can't have a go at it. And I think there's a lot of joy to be found in learning a new skill or learning a new sport. So just give it a go and see if you like it, because I've got wonderful friends now and like a whole other world of fun stuff to get involved in. Then you find cycling, and then you find gravel riding, and then someone says, oh, why don't you come climbing with us or for a hike, and then another sport comes on, another sport, and I mean, before you know it, you've got a garage full of equipment and you've spent all your money. But, you know, I just think it's introduced me to the most wonderful people, and it's opened up a whole different world to me that I would have just been I wouldn't have been the person that I am today without it.
So Phoebe, who are the 3 people who have inspired your outdoors adventures and why?
Oh, that's a tricky question, because there are lots of inspirational people and lots of people that have helped me along the way. So I think the first person that springs to mind is a woman called Anne Daniels, who is a kind of polar explorer. And she was part of, and I listened to a podcast about it, and I remember just thinking this woman must be absolutely amazing. She was part of a McVitie's kind of sponsored women's polar expedition in the late 90s. Mm-hmm. And they took women from all different backgrounds who had very little experience, had no experience of doing this, and they trained them up and they gave them this opportunity to kind of do this polar relay. And she had triplets at the time.
Wow.
And they were I can't remember how old they were, but they were quite little, and she left them to do this adventure. And I just remember, and she's gone on to subsequently then become an explorer and do all amazing stuff. But I remember thinking the bravery that she must have had to latch on to that sense of self, leave her children, which would have, I'm sure, incurred a lot of criticism at the time.
In
because
the 90s,
even now I get criticised for leaving my children from the joys of social media.
Do you actually? Do people message you and say that?
I went skiing for a week when Torm was only 6 months old, because we'd booked the trip like ages ago, and people were like, "Oh, do you miss your baby?" Oh yeah, of course I miss my baby, but I'm skiing all day and drinking all night. I haven't got time to miss him.
Wow, the people actually message you that. That's extraordinary.
Yeah, you'd be surprised how much criticism you get for doing like what I would consider fairly boring stuff. But
Men would not get that criticism.
No. And when I became pregnant the first time, people were like, "Oh, you'll have to give up all your bike racing." And I raced I didn't race during my pregnancy the second time because I was too sick, but I raced the first time. And I was back on the bike in 10 days after giving birth. Most of this stuff is self-imposed, either self-imposed or imposed by people who have no understanding of science, or imposed on us by men. If you post a picture of your heavily pregnant self exercising, you will incur hundreds of comments from people telling you you're selfish, you're putting your baby at risk. And I think you know absolutely nothing about me, my body, my baby, science, medicine, pregnancy. Most of you haven't even got a uterus. Like, you could just bloody get lost. But you can imagine that if you weren't that kind of person, you'd be really run down by it.
Yeah.
And so I just looked at this woman and I thought, oh my God, you left your triplets and you went and did this massive adventure, and then you came back and then you made that part of who you are then, and you went on to do more and more stuff. And I think she had another child. So, she had 4 children, and she was this epic explorer. Why should having children stop you as a woman doing that stuff? No one would have batted an eyelid if her husband had said, "Oh, well, I've just popped triplets out, but I'm buggering off for 3 months in the Arctic." It would have been like, "Oh, well done, isn't he amazing?" The other way around, it doesn't work. And I found it just like really inspiring, because people that buck the trend are the people that we need.
How about your second person?
My second person, I think it's going to have to go to my wonderful friend Nat, who I've done almost all of my adventures with. And I just love that if I say, "I've got this idea and I think we should do this," we've got none of the equipment that we need and none of the experience, but I really think that we would really enjoy it. And she'll go, "Okay, yeah, let's do it." And then we'll work out how we can beg, borrow or steal the stuff, and we'll rope in some people to help us, and then we'll set off on it. And at any given point, one of us will have a little moment, and then I'll be crying or she'll be crying, and I'll say, "It's not an adventure if one of us isn't crying." and now she comes and she helps me with the kids sometimes. And yeah, I know that if I suddenly decided that I'd got this plan in place and I thought, I want to do this adventure, and I don't particularly like doing things on my own, I quite like company, but there's only certain people you can spend time like that with. and she is one of them. So yeah, and we've got very different personalities and very different skills, but we sort of mesh together really well.
Yeah. Oh, amazing. And how about your third person?
And my third person has probably got to be my boyfriend Scott, because I would not have found any of this stuff, like this adventurous side of myself, I think, until I met him. Really, I'd done bits and pieces, but he helped me realise that I could do anything. And having somebody at home that believes wholeheartedly that you can do stuff even when you don't is a really powerful thing. And it doesn't have to be a partner. I mean, it helps if it's a partner because you need the backup at home. But, having a friend or a parent or a relative, someone close to you that says, you can do this, like, don't let anybody tell you you can't. And that has happened both in my kind of adventurous outdoorsy stuff and also at work, like applying for the jobs and the training that I have done, having somebody there that says, of course you can do this, why would you think that you couldn't do it? He took me up Helvellyn in the snow a long time ago, before we were together, before I kind of knew him that way, and we were with some friends, and he was like, just keep, and I remember thinking, this is kind of terrifying. I mean, I rode some of it up and down, and I remember thinking, like, these guys are with you, they're not going to let anything happen to you. Yes, this feels kind of terrifying, but also, I'd never been up a mountain like that. Like, we didn't walk as kids. I'd never even been to the Lake District. And all of a sudden, I'm sheltering at the top in a snowstorm with my bike, having made it, and I've got to get back down. And I was like, well, if you can do this, there's loads of stuff you can do. And it just stemmed from there, really. It was like, hang on a minute, there's a whole world of stuff that I have shut off because I've not believed in myself. Like, I firmly believe that anybody can ride 100 miles on a bike. Like, it is just pedalling and eating. You want to practice a little bit, but it is just pedalling and eating if you do it with the right people that make it fun. Right? And it takes all day. Who cares?
I mean, that Helvellyn adventure sounds amazing. Awesome.
We got some fun pictures of
Yeah,
that.
I bet you did. Well, Phoebe, honestly, this has been so much fun. Thank you so much. I've learnt so much, but also you are really a very, very inspirational person. And I know that's a bit cringe for me to say, but I think
I don't feel it, so it's very kind of you to say.
No, but I think what you're doing, you don't see many people doing what you're doing, so keep at it, and your kids have got a cool mum.
Oh, thank you. I'm hopeful that they think that for maybe another year or so before I mean, sometimes they are embarrassed of me when I turn up to pick them up in my cycling kit, and I think I've turned into my dad. But, at least I'm not wearing, I'm not a man in women's tights, I suppose.